right, put your hands together for Terry Heyman, everybody.
You can put it in there. Hi. When I was 17 and a senior in high school, I changed my face. I had my jaw surgically cut, and I had a piece of bone removed, and then I had my chin reattached in a slightly more forward position than it had been previously. And up until my senior year, I hadn't even really thought that much about my profile or my chin. But one day I was having dinner with my older brother, who I idolized, and he said to me, "You know what? When you shut your mouth, your chin disappears. Did you know that? Here, open your mouth, shut your mouth. Open, shut, open, shut." So I did that. And I knew that I was a mouth breather, and sometimes I slept with my mouth open and I always drooled. But after he said this, I started looking in the mirror a lot. And I became a little obsessed, and I would spend hours in the mirror with a hand mirror looking at my profile, trying to determine which looked better. Open, shut, open, shut. So I finally asked my mother, and I said, "What do you think of my chin?" And she took my face in her hand and tilted me one way and tilted me another, and she said, "Well, if it really bothers you, we can go see a plastic surgeon." And I know that seems like an extreme response, but I grew up on Long Island outside of New York City, and there were no shortages of plastic surgeons. And girls in my high school would come back from spring break with new noses all the time. So the concept of plastic surgery was not unusual for me. And so with about as much thought as, do you want to go shopping this afternoon? I said, okay. The first plastic surgeon we went to see said to me, "Well, we can do a small incision at the base of your chin and put in a plastic implant, and that'll help balance out your profile. And by the way, this is the same exact procedure that Marilyn Monroe had before she became famous. So there's no telling what this will do for you." The second doctor was unimpressed with me as a candidate for plastic surgery. He looked at me and then looked at my mother and kind of shrugged and said, "Well, I see what you mean, but she's a pretty girl. I just leave it alone." And up until that time, I had thought of myself as a pretty girl, or at least, not ugly. I mean, I had a boyfriend and I had friends. But then every time I looked in the mirror, all I could see was this less than perfect profile. The third plastic surgeon on Park Avenue in Manhattan looked at me and said, "Why, yes, she suffers from a weak chin." I had been suffering for 17 years and didn't even know it. And not only that, but her face is too long. And he took out this chart that showed a woman's face with the ideal proportions for Western beauty, and he said the face should be divided into 3 beautiful thirds. The first third goes from the top of your forehead to the middle of your eye. The second third from the middle of your eye to the bottom of your nose. And the bottom third should go from the bottom of your nose to the bottom of your chin. And indeed, my bottom third was a little bit longer than the top 2. So while we're at it, we should shorten her face. And here's the best part. There'll be no scars because we can cut from the inside of her mouth and just pull down her flesh and then do what needs to be done on the bone. And then when we're done, we'll just bring that up and just stitch it all up. Well, my mother liked this doctor because clearly he knew what he was talking about. And so she said to me, "Well, do you want to fix your chin?" And, I was 17 at the time, faced with this decision that would forever change my life. And, to the outside world, I looked like a very well-adjusted kid. But, inside, my self-esteem was like hanging on by a thread. And, Reese Witherspoon was just a kid back then. So there were no role models for girls with longer chins. And I hadn't yet gone to college and studied, the Japanese philosophy of wabi-sabi, which is embracing imperfection. And, it's pretty well established that the human brain that controls reasoning doesn't even fully mature until your early 20s, which was a good, 6 years away. So with all of these factors, I didn't even hesitate. I said, yes, fix my chin, because by then I just thought my life would be so much better if my chin was fixed, because then I could just finally stopped looking in the mirror, and I could sleep with my mouth shut and I wouldn't drool, and my brother would stop teasing me. So I said, yes, let's just do it. So my mother scheduled the surgery for spring break my senior year. And 2 days before I went into the hospital, I cut my medium length hair really short so I could tell kids when I got back to school, oh, I only look different because I got a new haircut. The surgery went as planned, and I woke up with a swollen face and a mouth full of stitches and bandages. And because of the stitches, I really couldn't open my mouth very wide, and I couldn't shut it, so I would lie in bed and drool. The other thing is, because of the stitches, I was forced to go on a liquid diet for a week, the result of which I lost 5 pounds, which everybody agreed was a really nice added bonus to the whole thing. I went back to school 10 days later, and most of the swelling gone. And some of my good friends said, oh, your chin looks really good, but most people didn't say anything. I have some permanent side effects from the surgery. Because the surgeon cut from inside my mouth, I have some permanent nerve damage on my lips, which means I have less than normal feeling right here, which means that I now feel about 80% of every kiss. It also means that, because I don't feel it normally, saliva can pool there, and if I'm not careful, I can drool. Years later, when I started dating the man that I would eventually marry, I felt like, I had to tell him the truth about my surgery, because I felt a little bit like a fraud, like a fake, like, the face that you say you're falling in love with isn't really me, genetically speaking. And so I told him, and he said he didn't care. But then years after that, I became pregnant, and I knew I was having a girl, and I started to wonder, what if she gets my old chin? What am I going to do about that? And I became a little obsessed, and I felt like I needed to have a policy in place before she was even born about what I was going to do. And so I resolved that whether she got my old chin or my husband's chin or some combo chin, that I would never mention it. And she's 12 now, and she has no idea about the rule of thirds for a perfect face. And most of the time I don't even think about my chin, except every so often I'll be out and I'll see a woman and maybe her chin is a little bit long or slightly sloped back, and I'll think, that looks like my old chin. And it's the same feeling I get when I run into an old friend and I'm reminded of how much I've missed her. Thank you.